Guys, welcome to the presentation do's and don'ts. If you haven't yet, please watch the video and PowerPoint on examples and kind of introducing proposals. That is the one, it should be in the modules right above this one, so make sure you watch that one first. It's on the Back to the Lake and Little Seagull reading for this week. Let's go ahead and go through presentation do's and don'ts. I want you to really pay attention as I go through this to the images I use, the color, the background, etc., because I really have used some things specifically to kind of show you, hey, this looks good, and no, this really doesn't. All right, so this picture right here, let's start with that. It is a picture of a presentation, so it's a little clip art. Remember that clip art may or may not be used depending on formal situations. So clip art, it's kind of cartoony, so it's a more informal thing. It's okay. You want to make sure that your pictures look professional though. So instead of using a clip art here, I might use something that looks more professional, maybe a headshot of myself instead of a clip art if it's a more formal environment. But again, this does relate to what's going on, okay? So let's start with some do's, some things that are good. So make sure that you ask the audience questions or involve them when possible. When you're doing a presentation that's electronic, like we will be for this class, it's a little bit more difficult, but when you're actually in person, involve them if you can. Make sure you time yourself. Practice and time yourself. Come prepared. Make sure that if you're told to do an 8 to 10 minute presentation, that presentation lasts at least 8 minutes and doesn't go past 10 minutes. That is such a critical skill. Often we speak quicker or we rush through some information when we're nervous. So making sure that you actually time it and practice it is a critical way to make sure that you don't go over or under in your time limit. Make sure that you use slides or other medium to distract your audience. This will especially help if you are nervous because they're more likely to be looking at your slide than they are you, which means you don't have to stress out about everybody looking at you. Edit. Once your slide is up, it looks really silly and unprofessional if you misspell words. Now, I have a master's degree in English and I have a doctorate in education. I have been doing professional papers. I have published papers. I have been doing this for a long time and I still make errors. We all do. I type extremely fast, which means sometimes the computer corrects something. They think that I'm trying to type one word and they correct it to a different word automatically and I don't notice. And it's not necessarily misspelled. It's just the wrong word. Our technology is so smart these days, but it's not smart enough to understand our actual intention. So make sure you look for misspelled or incorrect words. Use anecdotes and examples whenever you can. The last video you watched talked a lot about examples, so use personal examples, stories, things like that. And then I did already talk a lot in the last video about formal versus informal tone, so make sure that you're really honing on that idea. One last thing. Do use bullet points to discuss main ideas. Like that last slide, you saw I had very quick bullet points and I used my words to expand on what I wanted to say. But don't just write down huge chunks of information. Remember that a slideshow is supposed to enhance your presentation and bring attention to the important parts of your presentation. It shouldn't contain large chunks of text that you expect the audience to read. While you do want to distract them a bit to keep your own nerves calm, I'm going to stop reading now. I hope that you understood that I was just doing that for effect. Big chunks of text like this are distracting. First of all, the audience is going to be reading those and not necessarily listening to you. Second of all, if I'm just reading from the text, there's no point in presentation. I could just give them a copy of the PowerPoint. The point of a presentation is to engage the audience and to expand on things. So having small bullet points that just kind of remind you of the points that you want to make, and you use your words, and even if you're using note cards to kind of expand the discussion on those, is a much stronger way than just having everything you want to say verbatim on the PowerPoint. All right, so let's get to don't. Don't read straight from the slides. Again, small bullet points, kind of like I have on this slide, is a much better option. Don't introduce terminology that might be confusing for the audience. Make sure that you have definitions and be aware of your audience. We talk a lot about audience and purpose. Fair warning, my kitty cat might come over and interrupt our slideshow. So if you see a tail floating around, I'm sorry about that. Make sure that you define things and be aware of your audience. What does your audience know? What do they need to know? If you're in person, don't hide behind a podium or a desk. Make sure that you get out in front of furniture and that you kind of walk back and forth and that you're addressing all aspects of your audience. So make sure that you have really good open body language, that you're looking straight, left, right, center, okay? Don't be repetitive. Make sure that you are not saying the same thing multiple times, but you do want to repeat key ideas or phrases. So there's a difference between being repetitive, which implies that the information has already been stated and it doesn't necessarily need to be reiterated. But repeating key ideas and making sure they understand is just kind of one of those visual ways to give reminders. Don't come unprepared. Make sure that you prepare, you practice. And then don't make group work seem like it's for individual presentations. So if you're ever assigned a group presentation, it's not like, oh, here's my 2 slides, here's their 2. Make sure somebody puts it all together and uses transitions, and that you practice, and that it's not, when you're up there, you're not like, oh, wait, these are my slides. It should be a seamless, smooth transition from one person's work into the next so that it looks like one person created it all, and as a group, you look like one holistic group that has great ideas and have practice, and you all know your parts. More don'ts. You probably can't see this one right above the monkey, but it basically tells you not to use fonts that people can't read. It's so hard. You have to make sure that you use contrasting fonts. So you can see on the right that green is a little bit better, but even better is that black at the top, right? And then don't use too many visuals, especially just to have a picture. They should add to the presentation. So cute monkey or owl clip art really has nothing to do with what we're talking about. So make sure if you're going to use visuals that they count. And visuals are a good way to distract readers. Using charts, graphs, things like that are also great, but make sure that they're big enough that readers can see them and that they're not too complicated. And if you're going to use them, don't just post them up there. Make sure they're part of the conversation. If I'm going to put a chart up, I need to explain the chart and what it means, not just throw it up there and expect you to read it and understand it on your own.